So hello everyone. In the previous weeks, we mentioned about academic reading, academic writing, and academic note-taking. And for this week's presentation, we are going to talk about opinions, positions, and bias. We are going to distinguish between academic information and non-academic information. And I will also be mentioning about what type of human biases we have when we receive and analyze information. In order for you guys to understand better, I will also be using some sample text for you to see the differences when different researchers and different journalists mention about different types of information. The objective of the presentation and workshop today is to help you in your future paper writing and when you are making presentations in the future to be more accurate when you say different things and also to be more reflective on the things you are reading about. We know that there is a large amount of information on social media and news platforms, but as a social science student, you need to be really careful when you receive and analyze those information. So my explanations will be based on the book, Academic Success, A Student's Guide to Studying at a University. So if you're interested, please read this book, and it's really informative. Here is the sample text. Please spend some time to read through it, and later please tell me what you think about it. As I highlighted in yellow, this text is highly personal and subjective. So instead of being an academic piece of information, it is more like a diary style of information. The author of this text uses "I think that" to provide personal opinion and uses a phrase called "we all know that" to back up his or her opinion. However, this author did not use any citations or references to mention about specific research that provides any proof of his or her opinion. The central argument that this author provides is that radiation causes cancer, and he or she says that we all know that radiation causes cancer. In this way, he or she makes it clear that this is a common sense. However, we know that this might not be something that everybody knows and agrees upon. This also tries to convince us that there is a really strong agreement in the academia or literature that radiation causes cancer. However, the author didn't mention about any types of sources of information that gives this conclusion. Let's take a look at the second sentence. The author says that radiation causes cancer. As a social science student, we know that the word cause is a really strong statement. You will be learning in your statistics class in the future that correlation and causation are two different things. It takes a lot of effort and caution for social scientists and scientists in other fields to conclude X causes Y. The reason for that is that there might be some spurious relationships and there might exist some confounding factors between X and Y. Sometimes the real case might be that X causes Z and Z causes Y, but we cannot conclude that X causes Y. When we do experiments in fields like psychology or medical sciences, we use randomized controlled trials or RCTs to control for the variables in the environment that might influence X or Y. If you start doing natural experiments in your political science or economics research in the future, you might need to use specific statistical methods or techniques to control for some variables in order to draw upon some relationship between variables. And the good thing about using a natural experiment is that you do not need to face directly the human subjects. You can use available data, and the data can be really large data sets from the past few years, and you can use longitudinal or time series analyses to draw some conclusions from it. But the drawback of natural experiments is that, like I mentioned before, there are a large number of human-related noise in the background. so that it is really hard for you to separate the relationship from some confounding variables. Therefore, generally speaking, it is probably easier to investigate causation in an experimental setting because you can control the trials. However, it is not generalizable because it only appears to be the case in your own experiment. Sometimes you cannot easily extend it to the real world larger settings. I believe if you are interested in these discussions, you will be learning them in more detail in your future courses like research design and statistics. But for now, I want you to remember that when you want to raise an argument, you need to provide some existing research by using citations and references so that we know where you got the information. And you also should realize that there are certain research that are not so reliable. You need to find the reliable ones and use them as the basis for your arguments and opinions. In your paper, you shouldn't use phrases like "we all know that" or "scientists have proved that." You need to be specific about whether it is actually a common sense and actually scientists have proved that, which scientists and what type of research are involved. And if we take a look at the third sentence, children who live near high tension wires often die of cancer. We need to be specific about children of what age range and often is how often. As a social science student, you need to be detailed enough and specific about the research you are referring to. So if you are referring to a research or experiment, you probably need to specify what types of subjects are included in experiment and what settings are there for the experiment and what specific conclusions and limitations are there for that specific research. As a social science student, you need to apply your mathematics and statistics skills and knowledge into your reading and writing. When you are reading a report, a post, or a blog online, when it says that a lot of people think that way, you have to ask yourself, what does a lot of mean in this scenario? Therefore, I believe we all understand that mathematics is a really important language and communication tool for social scientists. We need to be very specific about which types of descriptive data we are mentioning about, whether it's average, mode, standard deviation, and so on. And also, we need to specify what types of relationships we are observing, whether it's linear relationship, curvilinear relationship, or quadratic relationships. So we use mathematics to clarify what we are observing. We can clearly see that the author of this short paragraph is lacking mathematical knowledge. And also, when we provide a literature review for a specific topic, we need to do an overview or a summary of different types of arguments, debates, and perspectives in this field, right? We can see that this author is not providing any opposing views or different perspectives in this topic. Next, let's look at the second last paragraph. So the author says that many humans who develop brain cancers have used mobile phones. However, if we think about it, many humans who develop different cancers have also used other devices and also eaten ice cream, drank coffee, and so on. We cannot just imply causation from this phenomenon. We can also see that the author's discussion about radiation is very vague because the author doesn't specify what type of radiation it is, whether it's the radiation from a fridge, from laptop, mobile phones, or micro oven. So we have no idea about what types of radiations the author is talking about. Just to give you a funny example about the difference between correlation and causation. So in the summer, we can observe more people dying in the sea, more accidents happening in the sea. And we can also observe an increase in ice cream sales. So there is a correlation between the two variables. However, we cannot say that any of the variable causes the other variable, right? So clearly, if we do data mining, we can observe a lot of correlational relationships between variables. However, whether it is a really valid or really meaningful relationships, that is for us to judge and for us to reflect upon. So let's conclude this first section. What is an opinion and what is a biased text? It is making claims without any or sufficient evidence, without references and citations to the existing literature, and no specific figures, tables, graphs, or charts are provided for our understanding of specific relationships and descriptive data. And usually the author makes some kind of confusion over correlation and causation. And again, the author is very general and is very personalized in making statements. Like we all know that, and I think that many people say that. So when you see those signal words, you will probably have an idea that what you are reading is not too academic. So the previous paragraph was a really bad example for you. So you should learn from it and you should avoid those mistakes when you are writing your final paper for this course. Since you are still a first-year undergraduate student, you are not expected to provide any novel or groundbreaking research. So basically, most of the time, what you are doing will be summarizing the literature and provide some personal comments on why you think some opinions or arguments can be improved in the literature. So you are not doing your primary research into your third or fourth year. So currently, you should practice doing literature review and summarize what are the things that are already being discussed in this topic. To improve your understanding of this topic, please pay enough attention to your statistics courses. And if you are learning programming, please use programming tools that help you calculate different descriptive data and relationships. After criticizing on the previous paragraph, now let's turn to an improved version of that paragraph. For this improved paragraph, we can easily see that the author doesn't use personalized phrases like I think or we all know that. Instead, the author actually uses citations, such as the author's name plus the year of publication, to refer to the existing research and scholars. So it's not a personalized opinion, it is more a literature review style. We provide the different sources of our information, not only to avoid plagiarism, but also to let our readers to verify whether we understood the research in the literature correctly. The readers can always refer to the books and journal articles that you are citing in your own article, so that they can verify whether you understood it correctly, and they can actually extend your discussions in their own works. Another good point about this paragraph is that, as I highlighted in green, the author provides some brief descriptions of the research he or she is citing, so that as readers, we can easily understand the logic behind the research and easily verify whether this research is relevant to the arguments that the author is making. If we look at this sentence that the author referred to, someone found that headaches and fatigue were reported more often by people who made longer phone calls. This clearly indicates that the author is not trying to conclude causation. Instead, the author is trying to imply correlation. And by using the word report, the author makes it clear that this research is about self-reports. And by saying that someone suggested that exposure to higher levels of radiation may be associated with birth deformities in pigs, the author also makes it clear that this is about association or correlation, not about causation. And most importantly, the author uses the word maybe, so it is not a definitive or conclusive statement. There is often a degree of imperfection, mistake, or limitation in our own original research. So it is always wise for us to include some discussions of our own limitations at the end of our papers or presentations. And sometimes we are not 100% sure about our conclusions. So we should use the word probably or maybe in order to make it clear that we realize that there are problems associated with our own research. That's why we include things like the degrees of significances or the asterisks in our regression tables. Another good thing about this paragraph is that the author makes brief descriptions of the research he or she is citing, especially the number of subjects or the observations. So in conclusion, when you are writing a paper or you are doing a presentation in front of other people, the important thing to keep in mind that you are not writing a diary. You are presenting your findings and your works in front of your audience. So you need to be accurate enough and careful enough when you deliver such information. So to be more academic, you need to include ample references and sufficient in-text citations. You need to cite properly, avoid plagiarism, and also phrase your arguments in a way that is easily understandable by your audience. And when you're doing a literature review, think of it as a brain exercise. So you need to weigh the pros and cons of different arguments or perspectives in the literature. And also, you should be able to suggest some further insights to the literature. What kind of things that future researchers can address to make this literature better? I believe that science is always dynamic and improving. So what we have to do is to stand on the shoulders of giants in the past and to use their findings and their contributions to make up our own arguments and our own observations. So now I believe you can understand the differences between opinions, which are personal and academic, as well as positions, which are impersonal and academic. So for opinions, they either do not provide evidence or they provide evidence that are not verifiable. They discuss that some scientists say something, but we never know where those scientists are. They probably are living on a different planet or living in a place where no one can find them. And an interesting point is that they often include categorical statements like Americans all like to eat burgers or all Chinese people are smart. Those types of stereotypical thinking is highly common if you read an academic text. Clearly, not every American likes to eat burger, and clearly, not every single Chinese is good at mathematics. So these types of arguments are making too many generalizations. But on the other hand, positions are objective. They present evidence and oftentimes opposing evidence. So they make a balance between different types of arguments in the literature. And by using those as foundations, they make opinions and they make positions in a way that is verifiable and logical. And lastly, I will be talking about biases. So a good way of defining bias is that it is a misrepresentation of objective facts. So a position is biased and misleading when it cherry picks the evidence, which means that citing only the small number of references that are favorable to your own position. So even though there is a huge number of evidence that supports the climate change argument that human activities are bringing some degree of influences to our climate and our environment. But some people who are against this statement are using a very small proportion of evidence to support that actually climate change is not true. Some people tend to have very strongly held opinions or beliefs, whether it's due to the family background, the cultural setting, or the religious background. So they are trying to avoid the large proportion of evidence, but they use a small amount of evidence to sustain their belief. If you get to study psychology or behavioral economics in the future, you'll be learning in more detail about different types of human and behavioral biases and effects, such as priming effect, framing effect, anchoring effect, availability, and representativeness heuristics. So these types of concepts, you will be learning them in the future if you are interested. For now, it is a good idea to believe that humans are easily manipulable. So we are not completely strong to manipulations and to misrepresentation of information. So always question yourself and always take into account of new evidence and new information. So when you update yourself with new ideas and new information, it is more likely for you to become more objective when assessing or evaluating different things. If you are interested in behavioral economics and psychology, you can ask me. I can recommend some of the books that I've been reading. And actually, behavioral and experimental economics have become a really popular field in the recent years. And the authors of some books have won Nobel Prizes, and they've done different interviews, and they've been explaining how human behaviors and actions are deviated from the classical economic series. So it is very interesting. So please let me know if you want any book recommendations. Yeah. So as a conclusion of my presentation today, I recommend you to avoid using words like absolutely or certainly in your paper. And instead, you should use words like maybe, probably, likely, and so on, so that the audience and the readers will understand that you know that there are always some unavoidable limitations in your own way of thinking and in your research settings and methods. And importantly, to emphasize again, you need to be very careful and distinguish between correlation and causation. And also, you need to be thinking about whether there are confounding factors and variables in the relationship you are investigating. And also, sometimes there might be a reverse causation or a reverse relationship. So always be careful about that as well. So use mathematics and statistics as tools and languages to explain your findings and to use them as your logical mindsets to understand the papers you are reading. And I believe in the future, when you take seminars, your professors and academic supervisors will be asking you to provide critiques to classical readings and books. So that will be a good occasion for you to practice.